Today we're visiting the Natural History Museum in Kensington. It's one of the most substantial museums, very popular with kids and tourists alike. It is probably the most beautiful building of any museum I can think of. You enter now through the garden, and there's some dinosaur footprint fossilised. There's a fossilised tree trunk. There's a rather bizarrely golden coloured Diplodocus, which I don't quite understand the choice of colour. I guess it looks good on Instagram. You walk through these landscape gardens. There's a little cafe outside, which always seems to be empty. But you see this beautiful building. The Natural History Museum actually started out as an adjunct of the British Museum, and they founded it. There was a lottery to purchase the Sir John Soane's collection, and it was a huge geological collection which became a department in the British Museum. Got split off in the 1860s, I think largely because of the diversity of the collections. The British Museum was becoming more of a historical only, and natural history really deserved a place of its own. And they moved from Bloomsbury over to here in South Kensington and built this Gothic palace. And the outside is covered in beautiful statues and sculptures and reliefs of various animals, and everyone seems a little bit different. Now we come into the main hall. Main hall's very impressive. You have a statue of Darwin at the top of the stairs there on the mezzanine in front of you. Above you's the whale. There used to be Dippy the Diplodocus, which was actually a cast, not a real dinosaur. And that's actually a bit of a theme here. And one thing where I think natural history museums are a little cheeky at times is there's a lot of casts of the dinosaurs. I'm not hanging around because it is a huge museum and we're going to try and do it all in 2 videos. So just walking off straight down the first corridor on my left, you get to the dinosaurs, which I would suggest starting at the dinosaurs if it's fairly early, because it gets busy. Everybody goes to see the dinosaurs, and a lot of people stop off in this dinosaur themed shop opposite. So heading round into the dinosaurs, it's a pretty good collection. It's not huge, but it's a very substantial collection and a very good explanation of the history. There's these screens here that give the evolution of the planet in terms of the movement of the continents, the types of life, the names of the eras, and up above obviously was Triceratops there. So you see you start off with Gondwanaland and Pangaea, and splitting out into more recognisable set of continents. And you can see all the different types of dinosaur and also the types of plants that grew during that period. Only a few years ago you used to walk along the gantry along the top and you come down a ramp next to this, but now it's the starting point. It's a favourite stopping point for people. It's the automaton of the T-Rex, and I came at Christmas and he was wearing a Christmas jumper. But you can dwell here, expect to have quite a crowd. People do hang around trying to get their photo taken with the T-Rex, and I'm sure it's on a loop and it repeats, but it pretty much feels like it's always something new. The light cycle on him, it's quite expressive. It's a very good automaton, a lot of fun, but do expect a bit of a crowd. It's the Natural History Museum's version of the Mona Lisa. Everyone comes and stops at the T-Rex. And the dinosaur section here, it's very good. A lot of different dinosaurs, different periods, good coverage of it. They actually have another room we'll do later on which covers the pliosaurs and the sea creatures, and a lot of them were found by Mary Anning, who's quite a significant figure in paleontology, for a long time overlooked but now really understood as a leading character in her field. But I'll draw to an end with the dinosaur. It's hard to walk away. So that's the walkway that used to go along at one point. Turn around here, you've got some questions, a lot of interactive displays, good explanations of paleontology, dinosaurs, what makes it a dinosaur, the different characteristics, the families of dinosaurs. Hours of fun for budding dinosaur fans. Here, there's a nice nest here. So it explains the birth of dinosaurs and the eggs and the various dinosaurs that preyed on them. Great skeleton of Gallimimus, which, if you've seen Jurassic Park, they're the medium-sized ones that run through the middle. Has some very dramatic pictures. Head of a T-Rex. If you're tall enough, you can put your hand inside the mouth. Makes a good photo. I must confess, I've done that a few times. There you go. If you have a child, you can hold them up to it. Makes a good photo. So here's a cast of a what is it? Pachyleptilus. Not too good with the dinosaur names, but the bony-headed dinosaurs. And there's a tail, armoured tail. It's quite a cool selection if you were tall like dinosaurs. Good explanation of bits of fossilised armour and skin, so the shell of some of the kind of tortoise-like dinosaurs. I'm sure paleontologists will be questioning that choice of phrase. And some claws from iguanodons and Taurovastus. Not too good with the rarer names here. And tusks. And here's a nice one you can actually touch. There's a lot of casts and real ones. It's fairly well noted where it's a cast, but I definitely think people walk out of here thinking they're all real. Here's a Stegosaurus, beautiful example up there. It's one of the best I've seen. This one was very interesting. It explains how the hollow bone chamber on that horn, they think that it could sort of snort through that and create a whistling sound. And you can see how it is almost like a musical instrument, so there's quite a bit of logic to that. And a form of, it's not a triceratops, but there were a lot of others. There was triceratops, and there were dozens of different ones that had a very similar kind of look. Then an explanation of the musculature of the animals and just the sheer size. That's something like Albertosaurus, I think, that huge leg there that's taller than a person. And some nice track marks. There's actually some track marks outside. And a hand. Not an ichthyosaur, but a similar kind of. And then the various heads and beaks. There's explanations of them. And all of the dinosaurs are very well annotated, so you get a good explanation of them. If you're really into dinosaurs, there's a great shop next door which definitely plays into the fact that this room's busy because the kids like it. There's kind of two rooms that are always quite crowded, and that's this one and the one with the blue whale. I think if you go to, we'll probably do the geology section in a second video. That is quite, a lot of it's quite quiet compared to this bit. And the Cocoon was surprisingly quiet. The Cocoon's actually really good, very short. We'll see that in a little while. The thigh bone of a large sauropod. Now, I'd murder an explanation of a sauropod, but effectively sauropods had flat feet with those, I think, 5 toes around the edge. I once had the opportunity to go to Dinosaur Valley National Park near Glen Rose, and you walk through the river And although the best ones have been removed to the Smithsonian, you can actually walk through and swim next to those dinosaur footprints. Here again, the toes, you can see the sheer size of them. There's a good explanation of the life expectancy. The argument was that they were kind of slow growers and very big, so probably lived quite a long time, and most of them died by violence rather than old age. There weren't many pensioner dinosaurs. And there's a good explanation of types of species and the adaptability, why some survived, some didn't. And then an explanation of the end of the dinosaurs and the different theories around that. A lot of very good maps of how the world looked. Here, a beautiful example. You can see how they think it was structured, standing on its hind legs, able to pick things off trees with its mouth, but also having some manipulation. There is an almost bird-like kind of look to the body structure. And here, there used to be 2 or 3 of these. There is at least one of them's been moved to one of the other shops, and there's one down a side corridor. But they're kind of talking about dinosaurs as some of them evolving into birds and the growth of feathers on them. Natural History Museum is very much a working academic institution, and there's a good explanation of paleontology, the tools, and the process of extracting them, so finding them, digging it, cutting it around, putting them in a plaster cast and binding them, taking them away, preparing them, cleaning it down as much as possible, studying it with everything from, there's an angle grinder specially made for cutting dinosaurs out of rock. So investigating them, drawing them, sketching them, working out the way in which the bones would have related to each other, and trying to construct from the model of bones what they would actually look like to draw those conclusions. And then at that point they can actually name it, because they have a concept of the structure and the whether it was a meat eater or where it sat within the genus. And a nice explanation of how the groups are all broken down. And some very well displayed examples of dinosaurs actually as they were found lying. And there's one which I seem to have missed, which is just a bundle of bones, and it's just a pile of bones that would be very hard to interpret. It does give you a good feel for the difficulty of the task itself. And here there's the Triceratops. This one I believe is a cast from the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum. If you're ever in Toronto, Royal Ontario Museum has an excellent collection of dinosaurs, and actually this one's from, I think this one is from the Royal Ontario Museum, and the ones there are a bit less cast, a bit more real. The Natural History Museum has a limited budget for purchasing more dinosaurs because they're not exactly awash with space to display them. There's an example here. I don't think it's an Ankylosaurus, but it's a very similar type of dinosaur, and you can see the model of what it looked like there, and this is what that's been extrapolated from. So you can see exactly the challenge they have getting to the final result, and obviously there have to be some leaps in interpretation there. Beautiful example here. Almost looks like a giant horse. We'll see a horse in a bit, and you'll see what I mean in terms of body shape and everything in a sec. Camelosaurus. And some very striking displays of dinosaurs in different formats, not just standing up like this one where you can see the spine and the overall structure. models of particularly well-known or important dinosaurs. Quite beautifully created. So I recognise Stegosaurus there. This is the bundle of bones. There were several of them where you're like, okay, there's a lot of bones there. It kind of looks like someone's eaten a chicken and thrown them all in a blender, and then you just have a mess of stone, and in the middle of it a whole load of bones, which then have to be extrapolated out, and we get told what they look like. So certainly an interesting section. There's a good explanation here of a lot of the people who actually started the field of paleontology and really went from a few bones that they didn't quite know what they were, to understanding that were dinosaurs, to understanding the evolution, the different families, the significance of them, and actually preserving them. And a lot of that was led by Britain, particularly down in Dorset area, Lyme Regis. There was a huge amount of paleontology. On the left you can just see some of the detailing on the building, where it's Gothic revival, but it's got a lot of naturalistic elements. And then there's a sleeping dinosaur there, which is quite cute for the kids, and try getting a clear view of that. Now moving swiftly on, over the other side was an exhibit of the sound of the River Thames, and it was quite interesting. This space is used for all sorts of exhibits, but it was very dark and subdued, and there was the sounds of the river as you if you put a microphone inside the river. I actually came here and saw the moon a few years ago. They had a large full-size ball representing the moon with very fine detailing, and it was quite stunning. Certainly the best picture of the moon I've ever taken. So it's always difficult to take a picture of the moon. Then as we move through to, there's a whole corridor of sketches, drawings, sculptures, and some of these are very old, go back to the Beagle and to zoological exploration from centuries ago. Really beautiful photos, drawings, sketches, quite stunning the level of skill that some of these artists have. They certainly did better at drawing than I did at school. Almost photographic, and then various displays of insects and birds and bugs and flora and fauna. Picture here from one of the explorations, and some taxidermy, just really to record these animals. There's a lot of species which have really ceased to exist, they've gone extinct, and they're preserved by places like the Natural History Museum. And look at that bug there, unbelievable detail. We're making our way round to the Cocoon. The Cocoon is new structure. It's built just round the side, and we'll get a view in a while I think, but it's basically a working section of the museum. There you can sort of see, you saw a little bit of it there, and you can see that white structure to the left. So you go through here and you have a display of some of the specimens that are maintained. There's millions of specimens stored at the Natural History Museum, and one of the displays shows you, for example, bees. So you have hundreds of different types of imperceptibly different bees. Beautiful pictures on the wall, and you can see this structure, which it's about 6 floors high, and you basically go inside of that, and the walk through is a mixture of an explanation of biodiversity and different types of species, and a study, and it explains all the different species that are stored, the work that's carried out, the purpose of that work, very open spaces. I was really surprised how few people were in this section. It's quite quick to visit and it is interesting. And during the week, you can actually see people working. So through some of the windows, you can see the people at work classifying and storing and everything that biologists do. So it's a quite good addition. I must admit, I've been to the Natural History Museum, well, I don't know, half a dozen times. Here's some storage, and each of those shelves is just rammed with specimens going back from very recent ones to hundreds of years old. A very, very important and significant collection of flora and fauna from around the world. Very impressive. Just the sheer scale of the storage here. And there's good explanations. About 3 floors within the Cocoon as you stroll around. I'll probably skip a little bit of it because this is going to be a very long video if I'm not a little judicious on what we show. But you can see, like here, the butterflies, and there's an explanation of the naming. And there's always alcoves where you can go across the little gantry into the alcove and you can see a separate display. And at the end here through the window you can actually see people working in the rooms opposite during the week. Explanation here of decoding DNA and all the work that's been done, particularly to understand insects and diseases that plague the world and how to actually treat them and deal with them. And the museum's very much at the forefront of scientific research. But very interesting. I'd say if you're thinking whether you should do biology as a separate GCSE, or you're someone who wants to do the 3 sciences instead of double science, it's well worth a visit to the Natural History Museum. Really, if you have any interest, and if you are, I'd say go to this section. If you have any interest in the natural world, or like a beautiful building, or so that's the whistle-stop tour of the Cocoon, and there's just a good explanation of the sheer amount of samples that they have. It's very hard to video things like display cabinets, but there's a display cabinet that had dozens of different types of bumblebee, and where you think there's one species of bumblebee, they've got dozens from around the world, and you can see the difference if you spend quite a while checking it out. It's very nice stuff about flora here and various pressings and preserved plants on this floor. I've skipped a couple of the rooms there because it's sort of plants and seeds and repeating the same thing, and we really are going to be short on time. So beautiful. That's the Cocoon. You go back down to the ground level, and very good addition to the museum. So now we're just opposite the dinosaurs, or the entrance to the dinosaurs is this corridor of stuffed animals, and it starts off with mammals. So you have different types of mammals. You have the dogs there, you have mammals with pouches, you have some dinosaurs that were actually mammals, very large skeleton of a mammalian dinosaur. And this corridor is very busy because there's a lot exhibited, but also it's a sort of throughway to other things. Then you have stuff like moles and porcupines. You have flying mammals like different types of bat. Here's the cats. Some of the cats and the bears look a little old, and there is actually an apology note in one of them. But here you see leopard, jaguar, liger, lion, tiger, all different great cats. and you can see they are a bit faded. These are very old specimens. Here the bears, you have grizzly bear, panda, it's polar bear at the end. Now, that's actually a panda, and that shows you how much they've faded, and there is actually a note saying, you know, this is 200 years old, so light has faded the colour. And I guess you can't just paint them, that wouldn't be on. Brown bears, grizzly bears, sloth bears, orange panda, and then polar bear at the end. Again, looks a little worse for wear. I think Dover Museum down in my town has an excellent stuffed polar bear, quite scarily reaching out to grab you. A series of foxes and dogs, different types of, or breeds of fox and dog. Some very interesting examples there. And then armadillos, you have the pangolin, there's if you give a next display case, the 9 ring. Here's some pangolins. There's 2 types. And then gnawing animals, beavers, tapirs. And here's the different types of armadillo there. And there's an anteater, koala, types of marsupials. And echidnas, porcupines, very interesting. Probably say interesting too much, but it's a very broad collection. And it's a very big collection. You walk through room after room of skunks here. I think that's a fennec fox, orangutan. At the end of the corridor, there's a saber-toothed tiger. Very nice example. If you ever get the chance to go to the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, there's some excellent saber-toothed tigers, mammoths, and werewolves. Quite a scary creature. Now we're coming into the last room we're going to cover on this particular video, because we're going to have to split this into 2 videos. But don't get your cup of tea yet, it's quite a big room. So you have this huge blue whale, you have skeletons of all these different types of whale hanging from the ceiling, and a large collection of porpoises and dolphins down the other end. It's quite surprising how many types there are. You don't really appreciate how many types of dolphin and similar creatures there are, but you can see, you know, narwhal and porpoise and killer whale and river dolphins, and as you can see, loads of different species, and they are fairly distinct. But in this room, we'll just walk around first. You've got the blue whale. At the base you have the large mammals, so you have fossils of old extinct versions, and you have elephants and rhino, hippo, tusks, huge great tusks. The rhinos actually have false horns because people have been trying to break into zoology museums to steal those, and skulls of different types of mammoth and mastodons all the way around the base. And around the outside is a collection of stuffed animals and skeletons, and some very good explanations of how different species behave. A really beautiful room, a little different to the older parts of the museum structurally, but very 20th century, but early. I think they have a two-horned rhino ancestor. And good examples of animals from cold climates, so like reindeer and ox. Antelopes of different types, and there's a kudu, there's little mini ones, there's European deer, there's red deer, roe deer, all sorts of different types of deer and antelope there. A wild boar, very striking animal. Don't think you can find them in the wild in the UK anymore. Northern Poland, you sometimes come across them. They live in the woods. And if you like these sort of creatures, just outside of Gdansk, there's a national park, Międzyzdroje, and that has bison like this. That's European bison and wild boars. Lovely hippo, quite striking, scaring that kid in the corner. And that pygmy hippo, different types of crocodilian skulls, moose, elks, and all sorts of different animals. A huge variety really, and a very interesting, nicely displayed. Some are a little bit weather beaten. A little warthog there, if you like the Lion King, everyone's favourite. Is it Timon or Pumbaa? I remember. Different types of, and then you have skeletons as good explanation of the habitats where they live and the levels of adaptation that animals have had to actually deal with that. There's an explanation there of poo from different animals, and you can see the lower water content of the camels, and then various dromedaries, camel. Huge great camel there, two hump, and different elephants. The baby elephant, those tusks, shows you just how big the tusks on an elephant can be. Background, the mammoth skulls, which we saw before. Again, if you make it to the La Brea Tar Pits Museum in Los Angeles, they have probably about 5 or 6 full mammoth skeletons on display, and so it's not just a skull and the tusks, but it really is the whole works, and they are super impressive. They have a room like this with mammoths. The skeletons there of the whales. And drawing the parallels here between the whales and the elephants. You see the flippers, if you see them without the flesh on, they're like little hands. And there is, in a corner there's a picture of a whale embryo showing how it basically has hands. These rhinos, different types of rhino. Sadly, they had to replace the tusks because people come and steal them. And round the back, if you think you've done with the room, round the back there's quite a big display in this corridor around the back of the hall with different types of animals in their habitat. So from capybaras to teeth from a distant mammal, zebra, tapir, different types of rhino. Some of these, yeah, this is an extinct one. It's quite a large one. So some of these are taxidermy, some are more models. There is the biggest rhino, that's a model of its leg. So just imagine how big that rhino was back millions of years ago. you wouldn't want to get it angry. There's explanations of the way that the different types are related. Woolly rhino there, the model, and there's the actual horn from the woolly rhino. Really quite a striking creature. Here you can weigh yourself if you dare to display your weight in a public museum, and it will compare your weight to different animals in this room. And round the top you have this viewing gallery where you can walk around, get a different perspective on things like the grey whale, the blue whale, the elephant, the sperm whale at the end, the different types of large creature. And up here there's a display of walruses, seals. From up here you get a really spectacular view of this room, and you can see why I've spent quite a while here and why it's one of probably 4 or 5 places that every visitor tends to come to. The sheer scale of these creatures is hard to really understand in a video, and they are beautiful examples. There's very good, if you've seen the museum guide to the Cambridge Museum of Zoology, there was a very nice whale there. There's a dugong, an explanation of mermaids and how they're really sea cows, dugongs, manatees. That's a possible interpretation. I can't say that looks like Ariel. Really very crowded, but quite a quiet room because people are really impressed. A staircase either side. We make our way round to the porpoises, and they have a very big selection of porpoises and dolphins, killer whales. There's a very nice narwhal as well. You can see, well, without pointing to it you won't see which ones I mean, but really is a lot, and underneath them there is an explanation of which one is which. You see there the hand inside the flipper, and in the corner there's an explanation of sort of evolutionary process of how it effectively has a hand when it's an embryo and it evolves into a flipper as it grows. But a really beautiful collection. And so much variety in them. You really don't think there's that variety, but, or maybe I didn't. And a good explanation of dolphins there, some of their behaviours. There's the narwhal with the horn on the front. Really striking room. You can spend a very long time in here. I've sort of skimmed through it as quickly as I can because I know I'm going to end the video with this room, but certainly in this first video hopefully you've enjoyed the building itself, the dinosaurs, the mammals, the cocoon, and here's a narwhal skull. And this is not a dinosaur, a fossil of a very ancient narwhal that had 2, or is it? Oh, actually no, it's a rare. It's a rare case where they can actually grow 2. It's a sort of deformation or abnormality, but quite striking. Here is an explanation of how dolphins swim, how they propel themselves forward. Different places that you can see whales, and where there've been beachings, because there is a growing number of beachings of whales, and there's a lot of questions over why they seem to be happening more often, which the museum doesn't really go into the reasons as such, but I think they're quite an intriguing topic. Here's some more porpoises. Back to the dugong. So I hope you enjoyed that tour, and come back next week. We're going to the other half of the museum. We're going to cover the geology, earthquakes and volcanoes, rock collection and some of the real treasures. So, for example, the redwood slice, which is definitely a must visit. So come back next week. Don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully see you soon.